This week on the latest episode of The Big Show, Charles Kirkland and I are going to sit down and I'm just going to keep it 100 with y'all. Ain't really nothing happening, but we're going to still do a show and I guarantee you it's going to be entertainment. We'll have all that plus reviews of a couple of new movies that are on streaming platforms or in theaters. The Wrecking Crew, Sin Help. We'll talk about both those films. We'll have all of that and more on probably what is one of the most unscripted and unpredictable hours ever of keeping it real with Film Gordon. Let's go. All right, and welcome to the latest episode of Keeping It Real with Film Gordon. I am Tim Gordon, and I am joined by Charles Kirkland Jr. Charles, what's going on, bro?
Yeah, what's happening, Tim? Look, I'm excited because when we do something unscripted and off the cuff, that's my territory. I love to improv, and you probably hate it when I do it, but this is gonna be fun.
Man, I'll just say this much, man, that and Charles knows this because he talks to me a lot. I usually always got a plan, right? I always got something up my sleeve, something, that I'm holding in reserve. Got none of that today. But guess what? I've been doing this long enough that it does not shake me. We're gonna be good, right? Because we were just having some conversations pre-show. I'm this intellectually curious person who's always trying to learn new stuff, and we're in the middle of like I guess toward the end of January now, Charles. And it's been a big week for the FilmGordon.com with our site. Charles Kirkland had an amazing week because the Wonder Man dropped earlier this week to record numbers on the Film Gordon, I will say. Wow. That was, I told Charles, I said, that was an experiment we tried that actually worked. um,
It's a weird feeling, but yeah, I'm like that we struck gold on that one. That's pretty cool.
So for audiences at home who are trying to understand what we're talking about, so the site we've been telling you every time you watch or watch this podcast or listen to this podcast that we'll all the films and all of the information that we talk about, a lot of it is on the filmgordon.com. And the audience has grown steadily, I would say, Charles, over the last 5 or 6 months, right? And we
Yeah,
this
yeah.
week are now in rarefied territory with the highest grossing numbers that we've ever had. And Charles, I'm here to report as of this recording because there's still a couple of more days left in the month after this recording ends that we now not only have, there was a time that if we had, over 1,000 folks, man, looking at the site in any one day, that was just an anomaly. I think it'll only happen like one time ever, right? And not only is it 5 times this month, Charles, but 3 days in a row. And I think that's largely, I mean, seriously, that's largely because, there have been some shows that we've covered on the site that are hugely popular. You think about stuff like Landman, you think about Wonder Man. It's all those man shows, Wonder and Landman. Those are great. Bridgerton is out right now. And folks are gonna really drive the numbers up with that one because that's hugely popular. We got Paradise coming, we got Cross coming, we got Daredevil. They announced yesterday, Charles, that Ted Lasso will be back in the summertime. So you and I are gonna fight over Ted
In the
Lasso
summertime.
because both of us love that show. We both love. I love me some Ted Lasso, man. So
Did you say
it,
we're not going to fight over it? That
I
means
said
you're
we
letting me
are gonna
have it.
fight over that one. We gonna
Oh,
fight over Ted Lasso because I know you want it. I know I want it, right? And as a rule, it's funny because Charles and I normally split these things up along, our levels of interest, right? So Charles, for the most part, is our guy who's going to cover superhero stuff, right? He actually even got Idris Elba because you're doing Hijack too right now, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
there's another show. There was something else, Charles, that I thought about that was a show, but we'll have to talk about it offline. But yeah, we've had a wonderful division of shows, and Charles, to his point, was able because we now are starting to get these episodes in advance, and we've shared this on the show that we don't like to watch them in advance because if you watch them all, you have nothing else to watch if they're week to week shows. But when they're dropping all the episodes in one day, and Charles, we should have did the same thing with his and hers earlier this month. That was a missed
Yeah.
opportunity. It didn't really kick in. Like if his and hers was coming out next month, that would have been the one. But yes, I
Because
said
now we have the blueprint. We didn't have the blueprint when his and hers came out to
right.
see how it would work. But now that we do, we know what to do.
Look, Charles. Yes, yes, sir. So all that stuff is going on the site, but I was just saying that it's been a big week that I know you've had a lot of Wonder Man. I've had a lot of Bridgerton. I was working, Starfleet Academy is out and it's doing what it's doing. I think, and as I just shared with Charles, I think the show is getting better. It's finding its legs because the first two or three episodes, I was like, And then last week's episode, and now the episode that's out this week, episode 4 and episode 5 next week, I think are pretty good. So I have high hopes because the Star Trek is now in its 60th year. They're celebrating the 60th anniversary this September. I'm now going to be forced to go back, and this was a running joke that Charles and I talked about this morning. I said I made the mistake that I wanted to rewatch all of the individual shows, and instead of starting at the beginning with the original series with William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy and everybody else, Nichelle Nichols, I started at the end at I mean not Deep Space Night at 9. I started
Discovery.
at Discovery. And Discovery is so far advanced that it's difficult for me to go back and watch the previous iterations because the technology is just jacked up. So I was telling Charles, I said, is that an Apple Mac computer they use it on Deep Space Nine in 1993? Wow. There's no spore drive. Was there any warp drive even in Deep Space Nine?
No, I don't think so. I
So yeah, I
don't-
fail on my part. So listen to young kids at home. If you're ever doing something, that would almost be, here's a good analogy, Charles. It would almost be like telling somebody if you want to learn about movies, they start off by watching everything first that's current and then trying to go back to watch something from 1920. It's going to look horrible. You're going to be like, this is boring, it's slow, it's black and white. What is this? So it's the same sort of situation of me crisscrossing around
I mean,
the Star
I mean,
Trek universe.
we know critics who are of that nature that have watched stuff current just can't go beyond a certain date in time because they just can't watch that other stuff.
Why you
Or
talking about that guy? Everybody knows who you're talking about, man.
I,
It's only one person we've ever had on the show that admitted that to us, and Charles and I both looked at him like,
oh, you're talking about that. I wouldn't talk about anybody like that. I'm just saying that as a generality.
and
You
it
know,
is a
there's
generality
certain
because we
critics
know a
out
lot
there.
of people that are that way. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So I at that and it's funny because saying that out loud, Charles, I should have known, but I think part of what I've learned, and for the second time in 5 episodes. I've watched a thing on Starfleet Academy, which has forced me to go back to rewatch an older version of Star Trek because they will reference something or a someone, and I'm like, well, what is that? So it started in, I think, episode 1 or 2 of Starfleet Academy where they kept talking about the burn. And I was like, what is the burn? So I pick up the phone and I call up all my Star Trek folks, Charles Kirkland included, and they're like, well, you need to watch Discovery and it'll explain the burn to you. And I went back and true enough, it's true. But there's an upcoming episode that I just reviewed that is not coming out for a week, right? Episode 5 of Star Trek, which is going to force me to go back to watch the entire season of Deep Space Nine. I've got to watch the run now because after It's a beautiful. I'm just gonna tell you, I'm not ruining it. There's no spoilers. It's a beautiful episode that honors probably one of the most underrated Starfleet commanders that they've had in the Federation. It is a beautifully written episode, Charles. And if you've got a copy of it, I think you got the screeners for Star Trek, didn't you?
I do. Yes.
You should watch episode 5, man, because I think you'd really. I really was like, I was like, oh my God, I'm not crying. That was great. That was great. So that's why I
Well,
said, go ahead.
I hate to burst your bubble and stop you from doing a deep dive into a subject, but there are 7 seasons of Deep Space Nine.
7?
7 seasons, yes.
So wait. Time out. Time out. Okay, I'm a little confused. And again, you heard me say at the beginning of this that I'm a guy that's intellectually curious, right? Charles, and I know you don't have the answer for this, but I just need to say it out loud. They did 7 episodes of Deep Space Nine, but 5 years only, or 5 seasons of Discovery?
Yep. Yes,
You
sir.
understand why I'm asking you that question, right?
Um, Hey, look, at the time, I believe it was on the Paramount or UPN, and UPN just needed programming, and that's why they just continued it on for, I mean, 7 years. And a lot of people will tell you maybe it was a year, maybe too long, but I think it told a decent story. I mean, it was about the space
The
station out
space
in the
station.
deep space. So, yeah.
Okay. If we got people out there who are, I mean, because the Star Trek people will get it immediately, but if you're a non-Trek person, right? The reason I ask that question is because again, I'm not nearly an authority, and Charles knows that I'm not. I talked to 3 people. Charles is one of them, who are huge fans of this series and of this franchise, right? And to a person, all 3 people I talked to, Charles Kirkland included, have told me that Captain Michael Burnham, one of one. Like, and I think that might have ruined it for me from watching every other Star Trek show, because her arc and the storytelling of the 5 seasons of Discovery to me is so well done. It makes it difficult. Like I'm saying, I'm going back trying to watch Captain Cisco. I'm like, I mean, yeah, he's engaging, but you gotta give me more than there needs to be a support team. Like I need the people on the bridge, the folks that are down, the technical guy. I need all that stuff, and I'm not getting it yet. And I understand that I probably need to invest some more time, Charles. I want to go back and watch Captain Janeway with Voyager. I want to go watch Next Generation with Captain Picard. I even need to check it. No?
I'm saying, wow, this is an undertaking because there's a lot of seasons of Next Generation. I want to say there were I know it had to be double digit. No, I think it
Hold
was
on a
about
second. I can
seven
tell you
seasons
right
too.
now.
I think it was 7 seasons of Next Generation, the same as Deep Space Nine. So
Um,
this is not an easy undertaking you're talking about doing here.
well, I mean, you keep forgetting that, and I have a unique situation on how I can ingest programming, right? I'm the guy you told we did a show one week and we talked about Justified, and we came back the next week, and I think Justified had 7 seasons, and I went through those seven
Yeah,
seasons in a week.
that's true. That is true.
Look, challenge accepted. You tell me, you can't do that. Now, I'm gonna tell you how I can't do it is if I try to watch your show and the show is not engaging, now it becomes like work trying to watch it. Discovery was not work. Justified is not work. Justified was
Oh
so
no,
much fun.
Justified was not work.
Yeah, Justified, you can just fly through Justified. So here's the order right here. So the original series, which is the one that anchored by Captain Kirk and Leonard Nimoy, went for 3 seasons, right? They had an
Hmm.
animated Star Trek that lasted 2 seasons. I don't know if Charles ever watched that one. The
No.
Next Generation was 7 seasons, starting in 1987 and ending in 93. And before it ended, they started Deep Space Nine, which also went 7 seasons, to your point. Deep Space Nine, and I'm trying to figure out how to seven. That's a very interesting count. So they had, oh, I see what they did. They started off the first season was January of 93, and then in September they started season two. Because I was looking at the math. I said the math's not mathing. So they went 7 years, but it lasted from 93 to 99, right?
Right.
Voyager had 7 seasons. Okay.
7 seasons. Yeah.
And this is interesting because I'm noticing, and maybe since I had never paid attention, they're overlapping Star Trek shows going on simultaneously, starting with Next Generation. So as I said, Next Generation went off the air in May of 94, but they had started Deep Space Nine in January of 93. So do you remember at any point, Charles, trying to follow the universe where you're trying to watch two different shows, one's ending and the other one sort of, one's descending, one's ascending?
They literally tie into each other. So I mean, when one was ending, the next one was picking up from pieces from the previous series. So
Did
there
they
were
did they ever
connective.
cross
There's
over?
connecting tissues. There's
Did
connecting
they ever
tissues
cross
between them
over
all.
though?
I'm start Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. They did connect, have crossovers. I don't think Voyager ever had a crossover with
Deep
the
Space Nine.
Next Generation.
No, no, with Deep Space Nine. Well, I'll say this. I know for a fact, having watched the pilot of Deep Space Nine, that Luke Picard, who was the commander of the what was the ship that he had in Next Generation?
Uh, the Enterprise.
Was that the Enterprise too?
Yeah, Jean-Luc Picard did the Enterprise as well.
Okay,
Yes.
so while the Enterprise, so I think the crossover to me, which was odd but now makes sense, is that the very first episode of Deep Space Nine, the Borg have assimilated into Luke Picard, and it was some orders that he gave that got Commander Cisco's wife killed in the pilot. And
Right.
then they have to, then at some point, I think the story moves forward 3 years in, I guess, Starfleet time. And the two go to meet. And I mean, he summons Cisco for a meeting that's very, very tense. And I didn't get it, but I guess if I would watch Deep Space, Next Generation, it would make more sense to understand. So yeah, so this is a part of how the imagination, not of just Gene Roddenberry, but the folks who picked up the mantle after Roddenberry's death, how they always kept these shows sort of interconnected. And this gets us back to the original point that I was making about an episode that's to come next week from Starfleet Academy, which harkens back 30 years in the Star Trek canon to celebrate and honor a character. So I thought it was very well done. Thought it was very well done. But yeah, to your point, Charles, I'm looking that Deep Space Nine was on probably about a year, maybe almost a year and a half before the Next Generation went off the air. And then Voyager started in 95 while Deep Space Nine was in the middle of its third season. So
Right.
that's pretty interesting. And those two never crossed, like Captain Janeway never put Voyager to the Deep Space Nine space station. None of that ever.
I do not believe that they ever crossed over, although
Huh.
their stories were similar because Deep Space Nine guarded a wormhole hole, outside of Bajor, and Voyager fell through another wormhole and ended up on the far side of the galaxy. So yeah.
Wow, you're right. It was. Man, look, I wasn't doubting you, but look, USS Enterprise was Captain Luke Picard. Now, Enterprise is another series which I'm not really familiar with that started in September of 2001 as Voyager ended on May 2001.
Mm.
Huh. Are
Was
you
that
familiar?
the one with
Enterprise is the sixth series in the Star Trek franchise, and it's a prequel to Star Trek, the original series, set in the 22nd century, 100 years before the original series, and it follows the adventures of the Enterprise. Who was the captain on this? Oh, hold on a second. Core trio of Captain Jonathan Archer. Huh. Are you familiar with that Scott Bakula?
Yeah, but Bakula, Scott Bakula, who's now on
I call him Bakula. Bakula.
Scott Bakula, who's now on NCI New Orleans or whatever, one of those. But I watched a couple of episodes, but I didn't really follow that series because
Huh.
again, it's a prequel to the original series, and I'm like, sometimes you don't really need to know all that stuff. It doesn't really matter.
Interesting. So that series stayed on the air only 4 seasons. It was off in 2005. And then Star Trek sort of lay dormant for the first time and say, so they had a run, Charles, from 1987 to 2005. So almost 20 years of Star Trek shows that were on the air. So they took a break and then came the bomb in 2017. They took a 12-year break. They come back in 2017. And if you have not watched Star Trek Discovery, you are missing out. Star Trek Discovery is there's a man that we canceled one time that said, I believe I can fly. This show made me believe again in the franchise. It really did, Charles. I mean, Star Trek Discovery, you just heard me say it earlier. Commander Michael Burnham, who becomes Captain Michael Burnham, and by the end of it becomes Admiral Michael Burnham. 101. What a well-written story. Charles, elaborate on what made Discovery so special and how it brought Star Trek back. And not just brought it back, but the technology, much like the Marvel movies, caught up with what Star Trek was trying to do. And I think when you marry good writing and good technology to tell stories about space, really, really works.
The funny thing about it was Michael Burnham was the first African American woman to be a captain slash commander slash admiral or anything of that name. She wasn't the first African American because that was Avery Brooks. She wasn't the first woman because that was Janeway in was that Voyager. So,
Hmm.
but it seemed like they got everything right when they put her in that role. They had a strong black woman who was confident and knew what she was. I mean, knew how. It wasn't just about thinking about right now, but was thinking a few steps. Like she was a chess master in how she approached her work in on the series, and uh, lots of conflicts and things that were going on around her, but she found a way to lead and excel in ways that other commanders just hadn't been able to do. And that's why, even after the show has ended, her legacy lives on and it just continues on. And you see in Starfleet Academy, a lot of that calls back to her and what she had done and how she had overcome or survived or led the Federation even through all the times that they were critical in the series. So yeah, there are lasting impacts that came from what she had done, and I mean just a powerful, well-written story that and you're right, the technology when we got to Discovery was so much better, it had been so much improved that it really was easy for us to be immersed in the galaxy in which she was living and the stories that they were telling. It was just highly compelling. And so, yeah, I can see where if you start with Star Trek Discovery, that it's hard to go to some place like Deep Space Nine because the stories are a lot slower and methodical and sometimes seem aimless. So, this was a masterwork for Star Trek Discovery. And even as they got into later episodes like Star Trek Picard, when they do Picard's story later on, there's still the stories are much more compelling than they were even when he was doing the next
The next
generation. So
generation, yeah.
I think after Roddenberry had passed and some other people got an opportunity to put their hands into the franchise, that they were able to flesh it out a little deeper than Roddenberry would have done himself.
Well, let me say this, man. So let me just keep going down this hole. So coming back starting September 24th, 2017 to now, we've now had Discovery for 5 seasons. They did Star Trek or Short Treks, a couple of seasons of those with Alex Kurtzman. Picard hit the air during the pandemic, January of 2020, and it ran for 3 seasons through April of 2023. I've got to go back and watch Picard too. Lower Decks. What is Lower Decks? And that started also in
Or Dex is
2020.
an animated
Okay.
comedy Star Trek type story, and I
Okay.
mean it's nothing that you really need to invest in unless you just want to know everything.
Okay, and then there's Star Trek Prodigy, which was kind of and another animated sci-fi series. Was the 10th Star Trek series. It's funny that they count all these things, man. Everything is in the canon, right? And then comes Strange New Worlds in 2022, which is still running. It's supposed to return for season 4, Charles, sometime this year. And they've also had it slated for a fifth season. So that one will probably run probably through 2027. The 11th series. And of course, this is Captain Pike and his crew of the Starship Enterprise in the 23rd century during the decade. Another prequel to the original series. But this one makes sense because we know Captain Pike. Because they even had this is the same Captain Pike or Anson Mount, who was actually featured in maybe a season of Discovery. I think it was season 2 of Discovery.
Well, Pike now has been everywhere because he's been in one of the reboot movies. He's been in Discovery. He's also, I mean, well, he was there from the beginning because even in the first episodes of the original Star Trek, he had played a couple roles where and been a couple of shows where they were talking about how he passed the torch on to Captain Kirk, and he's always been around, but
Right.
now they're just fleshing out the character.
And now this leads us back to the current show, Starfleet Academy, which now has Holly Hunter as Captain Nala Aki. I think that's how we pronounce her name. Set in the 32nd century. Now, this is interesting. If this is set in the 32nd century, and if we're keeping our timelines correct, this is in the same universe of Star Trek Discovery because they jump from the 24th century or the 23rd century to the 32nd century. Am I correct?
I want to say because yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because she was young. Well, we found out that Captain Nala is like 500 years old or something like that, and she was there when things started happening. So it's probably been about 400, 500 years since the last series supposedly took place. So you have a jump there.
So it says, and you're absolutely correct, Charles. It says it's set in the 32nd century, the far future of the Star Trek franchise, where Starfleet and the United Federation of Planets are recovering from a cataclysmic event as depicted in Star Trek Discovery. Right.
The
So, and
burn.
we know what the
Yeah.
cataclysmic event was, right? So, yeah, so this is interesting. They are taught aboard the USS Athena, a starship that docks at the Starfleet Academy campus in San Francisco, but can be deployed with the rest of the fleet. So I just think it's smart, man. Which is this is
Also
the
was really cool because we never saw in the past a starship that could enter the Earth's atmosphere and land. Everything else was a space dock. It would be out in like outside on the universe, outside of the planet, in a star dock, and that's where you had stargates and uh, Deep Space Nine was another star dock, places where they would land like a ship would land to refuel and all that stuff. But this was the first time we saw a starcraft, a starship actually land on Earth and then be able to take off again, which was really cool.
So I'm just for selfish reasons, Charles. Um, since the universes are sort of in the same kind of place, man, it'd be great to have a crossover episode, man. It'd bring a tear to my eye to see Burnham show up at some point talking to Aki. It would be cool. I'm just
I
saying.
mean, Burnham is half Vulcan, so there's no telling how long she could live. It's possible. It's possible.
Just saying. Just saying. So yeah, man. So I thought looking at the whole universe and the reason why I said we had to take a deep dive, Charles knows that I'm ramping up. I'm giving myself, Charles, now. We're going into February. So I've got about 6 months to watch as much of this content as possible before we celebrate the 60th anniversary of Star Trek, which is going to happen on September the 8th, which ironically, if I'm correct, Charles, is usually the time that we're in TIFF. So
Yeah.
that's, yeah, because I'm assuming we'll be in TIFF for the celebration, but I think that's going to be huge, man. I can't wait. And I told Charles, I said, I never was like an outward huge Star Trek fan, and I would always listen to the Trekkers and make fun of them. But it wasn't until the end of season one when I was watching Discovery, and you hear at the very end of the episode, "Hey, we got an alert. I think it's the Enterprise." And they show the USS Enterprise. And you hear that theme, that erotic, that iconic theme from the 60s. I was like, oh my God, they're back. So I love that show. And even the versions we never, it's funny. We only get a rebooted Kirk in the movies, right? Where you get what's the actor's name? Chris Pine, right? Who
Chris
played
Pine. Yeah.
Captain Kirk. And it's cool for Pike to show up, right? Pike has shown up in Discovery and now in Strange New Worlds, and he was in the original series. How come Kirk never shows up? We see his name all over the place. Like, it was a cool scene early in Starfleet Academy where I guess one of the students was getting a tour and they had the James T. Kirk. And I was like, how come Kirk never shows up anywhere? How come we never are able to either have not I'm not saying a cameo with the now William Shatner because he's too old to play it, but can't we have like a younger version of somebody that looks like Captain Kirk that shows up at some point? So that Kirk gets acknowledged other than just the original series and what he's done and his lineage. I mean, does that make sense, Charles? Because you can put Pike all over the place, but there's not a lot of Kirk that's all over the place.
Well, I believe in generations, Captain Kirk died. So I mean, he's gone, and and I think he's been gone for even in that series, he's been dead for 75 years.
You
So
said in
I don't really think
generations. The
I
move
don't
the
think
movie or the series?
uh uh and this is another story called Generations, not the next generation, but this was before this was because Captain Picard had to go back into the past to actually meet Kirk because he had been dead by the time Picard actually took over the ship, took over the Enterprise. So yeah, I mean they covered it I think in one of the movies where there was a crossover with the old generation and the new generation.
That was in the
And
movie. That's what I'm saying. So
yeah,
in Star Trek like a multiverse? I mean, like they're jumping through time. I'm not being funny. I'm just asking a question because I've watched ships jump 900 years into the future. Are there any situations like what you just said? I know there were episodes of the original series where they went back in the past. I mean, it's a multiverse time jump situation. I'm sure somebody could write something that you could figure out a way to introduce us to a Captain Kirk like, I mean, a character, Captain Kirk, that doesn't have to be William Shatner.
I mean there's Chris Pine, but I mean I don't think it's necessary because again, Star Trek isn't gimmicky like that. They're not going to go for the sake of like the MCU and make up a timeline correction or whatever to bring back. They don't need Captain Kirk. I mean, they can move on with. They have moved on without him, and I think this franchise has been pretty successful in having all these other captains, and that none of them really have to touch each other. You know what I mean?
Interesting. So I'm reading this now. Captain Kirk, to your point, dies in the 1994 film Star Trek Generations. And for somebody at home going, Tim is spoiling it. Star Trek Generations came out 30 years ago. Because I look,
1994,
yeah,
94 that
over
movie
30
came out.
years ago. So if you didn't see it by now, I'm sorry. I'm spoiling it for me. I didn't see it. Look at this. He dies in 1994 film Star Trek Generations while assisting Captain Luke Picard in stopping Dr. Tolian Saran on Veridan 3, right?
I
After
knew it was something like that. I
yeah,
remember that.
after exiting the Nexus, Kirk is fatally injured to falling from a rickety bridge during a fight. His final words are, "Oh my." And he's buried by he's buried by Picard. That's interesting. Okay. Oh my. Oh, I'm sorry, man. That's not funny, but Captain Kirk, man. Now, Spock dies too in one of these movies. Am I correct?
Oh yeah, technically Spock has died a couple times, but yes,
And they keep
Spock
bringing
is.
him back.
That was when Gene Roddenberry was in charge of things, and they killed Spock off in Star Trek 2, and then Star Trek 3 was a search for Spock. I can't remember
And
that
then they brought
timeline myself.
Spock back. I mean, I could look it up and find out all these Spock, the reemergence of Spock. But it was cool to see him, a young Spock, in Discovery. That's pretty cool. So yeah, man. So all right, that's interesting. So that's the Star Trek situation. Let's pivot and talk about Wonder Man because this has been a question that people have asked me all week because I haven't finished it yet, and I know you have. Talk about your feelings about Wonder Man. Why was it special? And Wonder Man is getting a huge audience. There are people that are really tuning in, and I think it's very mixed, man. But break it down for folks what you thought about Wonder Man.
Okay, so I I am convinced, as a lot of people are, that there's a lot of superhero fatigue that exists in the world of the MCU and maybe the DCU and wherever else. So I think that it's really refreshing that they made this story where it doesn't really focus on him being as much of a superhero as him just trying to survive and be an actor, and which is a quality that a lot of people can relate to, especially in the world of acting nowadays. People can relate to how hard it is to be an actor and what you have to go through to get a job. Then you throw in a wrinkle about superheroes can't be working in films, in which when you get into it, you'll find out. It's incredibly hard, and there's a lot of pressure on Simon Williams to get this role as Wonder Man, that a movie that he idolized from childhood. I think this show is really smart. It's very meta. Um, uh, um, I can't think of the guy that all of a sudden the music supervisor's name escapes my
Wait,
mind,
hold on a
but
second. Music supervisor for Wonder Man.
Dave London, isn't that his name? Dave some
Uh,
anyway, you'll find it.
yeah,
He's incredibly smart in the song choices. There's usually a song that plays at the end of each episode over the end credits that
Dave
kind of
Jordan.
wraps up Dave Jordan, that kind of wraps up the everything that you've seen in that episode. I mean, there's one episode he plays Superman, which is really cool. I'm Every Woman after another, and it may sound odd as I'm saying it, but as the things happen in each show, it's really smart. It's really smart. It's grounded because you got stars like Joe Pantoliano in it, Josh Gad, Ashley Green, real actors and actresses in Hollywood who are playing themselves in this. So it makes it a extremely well grounded and completely real feeling story. And it's not so much about him being a superhero, but it's just about him trying to survive. And all of us know that feeling of having wins and losses, happiness and sadness, and just feeling like an outcast sometimes and a freak. And I think that this is a really smart take for Marvel, a nice direction that they went into as they're making this story.
Interesting, man. So does that count for the overwhelming, overwhelming numbers, man, of people checking in to read the recaps that you wrote. And in our case, and we talked about it earlier, generally as a rule, we've had a rule, right? That if a show is dropping all its episodes on one day, we'll just do a review of it because it didn't make sense in the past to try to recap all the episodes of a show if you try plan them at one time. But I had a thought. I wanted to try something out because we had never done it before, right? And I said, Charles, man, just do a recap of each one. And we had them all in advance, so it made it easier. And I was surprised, shocked and surprised to see 8 recaps show up like a week before the show. I was like, oh, cool. So I was so inspired by that because you got to remember, Wonder Man is about 30, 32 minutes, right? Each episode.
Each episode, yeah.
And Bridgerton is about an hour every episode. So the irony of it is, Charles, is that you wound up doing 4 hours of Wonder Man. I wound up doing 4 hours of Bridgerton. I did 4 episodes, you did 8. So, and all 4 of my Bridgerton episodes dropped today, right? So I think this is one of those rare times because outside of these two shows, everything else that you reviewed or reviewing, Hijack is on once a week, so you can't jump ahead. Well, technically we can because we have the episodes, but why don't you do that again, Charles? Why don't you just go ahead on and write a whole season of
Is that a challenge? Are you
No,
challenging
no,
me?
I mean, don't do that to yourself, man. I mean, you could. Same thing with Cross. I got all the Cross episodes. I haven't watched one yet because it doesn't drop for like 2 more weeks. I'm like, we'll get to Cross, but it comes out once a week. But I enjoy the fun of watching it weekly, like regular people do. Except when I say regular people, I'm talking about the audience. But I just watch it a couple of days or 2 or 3 days before it drops so that I could write it and then have it up. But I want to stay in tune. I don't want to get too far ahead of a show. It's because you don't have anybody to talk to about it. You're like, hey man, I just watched episode 9. Episode 9 is only 3 weeks in. I'm like, oh my bad.
Look, my sons and I, we all watched the first 4 episodes of Wonder Man together, right? And we they had to tap out because they had to go to school or work the next day or whatever. And I'm like, all right, well, peace. I'm gonna finish it up. And so they finally got to watch it. I think they were watching it yesterday, and we're sitting down there and we're watching it all together. And I'm like, did we get to the part where he says? And they were like, no. I'm like, oh dang, I might have spoiled it for you.
Yeah, man. So no, I find the whole thing interesting now that over the course, Charles, I would say from say October to now, we flipped the script on the site because you remember I went to Toronto, you were doing Middleburg. So we were doing all these awards films and we flipped because ironically, there's no secret because we talk about it all the time. There's not a lot of output in January or February at the box office, right? So, and plus it's award season, it's Oscars and all that other stuff. So it's kind of light. So the television stuff fills in the gap, right? And then we'll get back to heavy movieing, I'm assuming, within the next 60 days because around April, it'll start to pick up because we'll be getting the summertime and the anticipated films. And television, for the most part, slows down. There's not a lot of new shows coming out over the summer. Am I correct? Like we
Right.
might get some Ted Lasso, but so I think the balance of it all works out really, really well because by the time we pick back up to really going deep into television, it's normally around late October, early November, which shows are coming back. But by that time, we will have encompassed a lot of the film stuff between the two major film festivals we have, as well as the one that we're running, which we probably need to do a better job of covering films uh, and putting that on the site as well for light rail. So, yeah, it's interesting, Charles. I think it's going to work out. I think it's a very interesting experiment that is going on that is paying off with huge numbers for us. And I'm looking forward to you reading something that I took a lot of pride in creating. I was telling Charles that I guess we'd had a conversation about I want to do something for Black History Month. And I just couldn't figure out the angle. I wasn't inspired. I didn't want to do, hey man, here's my favorite 28 films or 28 Black D's. And I was like, I got to come up with something. And I think you and I had gone out to a screening of Send Help, which you're going to review a little later on. And I got back
Yeah.
home and Shaft was on, right? The original Shaft was on Turner Classic Movies. And I was like, oh, snap. So I watched Shaft. And then I started watching a little bit of On the Waterfront, right? And I was like, both of these films are New York stories. Shafts in Harlem, the docks and down by the rivers in Manhattan. So it inspired me to create a series that we're going to start this next month called Black New York, where we're going to take people cinematically through New York City and the five boroughs, and I'm talking about black films exclusively. So don't go in there looking for Scorsese films or Woody Allen films or Brian De Palma films. Don't go looking for any of that stuff. John Cassavetes, not doing any of that. This
So
is,
so you're saying that the new Melania movie won't be on the list? I mean,
was it made in
because
New
I mean,
York?
yeah, she was in New York. Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you said that. No, it won't be on the list. And it won't be on the list because I set up rules that I wanted to
Mhm.
go from 1950 to 2000. So all the movies in between that 50-year time span. So, you're talking movies like that. So there's a lot of movies that you may recognize. New Jack City, Shaft. Trying to think of some other New York favorites. There's a lot of Spike Lee, right? So, Mo Better Blues. Crooklyn, Clockers, He Got Game, all those movies, Do the Right Thing, all those movies are in there, right? But there's also smaller movies like Kathleen Collins's Losing Ground. Putney Swope is in there from 1969. I mean, so it to me was a really interesting mix. And the other thing, which I didn't share with my good friend Charles, that I did, is that we also created a playlist for a hip hop playlist for the different boroughs that are being featured. Now, the music doesn't necessarily have to be tied to the film, but it's tied like a gritty inspiration, a hip hop inspiration to the movie. And I'm gonna let you figure that out when you listen to it. Now, in
Okay.
addition, if the individual movie had a song in it that epitomizes the movie, then inside that day, that song will be attached to that movie. But there's a separate playlist there's a companion to this that is pretty different. So there was a lot of thought that went into it, man, because if I'm gonna, Charles has heard me say this, and I'll say this publicly for the audience. Charles, how many times have you heard me say, if we're gonna do a thing, let's do a thing, right? When we were planning to have the film festival, you never heard me say this is not your Spider-Man film festival. You never heard me say
Yeah,
that?
I have heard you say that
Yeah.
several times.
Spider-Man
Several
Film
times.
Festival means your friendly neighborhood film
Your
festival.
friendly neighborhood film festival. We can't
Any
be that.
anybody can have a film festival, right? And that's no disrespect to anybody, right? You have an idea, a concept. Every film festival, as I've shared with Charles and the rest of the team, is based on an idea of whoever the founder is, right? Whoever comes up with an idea for a film festival, whatever their vision is, that's what we're doing with a film festival. My vision, as you can tell, is very expansive, right? So I'm into having gone to film festivals for like several decades and seeing a lot of stuff that worked where I'm like, man, we should have something like that here. So I think the same way when it comes to the film Gordon, right? I'm like, yeah, man, we write reviews and we do recaps, we do think pieces and we do interviews and we do all these other things. But then I'm also looking to continue to be inspired, and I think about ideas, and I'm always on Charles, and he knows it because we had one of these conversations earlier this week. Charles, you got some ideas, man. Bring it to the table, man. I like creative thinking because sometimes we need outside. Matter of fact, it's not even thinking outside the box. Pretend there is no box. Just come up with something, and then we'll craft it into something that I think we can work with. That represents who you are. I mean, seriously, I'm not being funny. You've seen me do it. I was working in my office a couple of days ago, and I started thinking about, I got into this music, and this happens a lot. I got into this music wormhole where I started listening to music, Charles. And the next thing you know, I was listening to a lot of Aretha Franklin. So I said, man, I loved Amazing Grace. Came out in 2018. I started watching clips of Aretha Franklin singing an Amazing Grace. And then I wrote a piece about it. Did you read the Amazing Grace piece I wrote?
No.
He's a hater, man. Somebody read it because
I,
I looked at the numbers. It wasn't you. Somebody read it.
somebody read it.
He's a hater,
That
man.
they read it for me.
You know what, man? It's all right. That's why I don't read your little funky Wonder Man stuff. No, I'm teasing you, man. I absolutely did read Wonder Man, but let's transition, man, because we've got about 10 minutes left in the show, which gives us
Really? That's all? Okay, let's go.
yeah, I've been talking, man, so I'm sorry. We got 10 minutes left, man, and we got two movies to review this week. And we're going to start off with the first one, which we both seen, but you reviewed it, which of course is Send Help. And Send Help, of course, tells the story of a of a woman who is probably brilliant, but socially awkward. I guess I'll say that. And after being the lone survivors of a plane crash, an overlooked and underappreciated employee attempts to prove her worth to her new Nepo baby boss in Send Help, written by Charles Kirkland Jr. Charles, take it away.
Well, I appreciate you reading my intro because I guess you must have liked it, huh? No, let me just say this. This is Sam Raimi's return to the horror genre. I mean, he cut his teeth on films like The Evil Dead, and his last movie was Drag Me to Hell, which was 2009, I believe it was. Yeah.
I
So
like that.
this is like a 17-year absence that Sam Raimi has had from doing horror films. And but I'll say this: I don't think this movie is really a straight up horror film. I think it's more of a psychological thriller, and it feels a lot like Misery. You remember Misery? It feels a lot like Misery, but it's on a desert island where Linda Little and her boss Bradley Preston have survived this plane crash, and they're stranded on this island, and she desperately wants to prove to Bradley that she's worth being a leadership material, that she needs can be his executive or whatever. And he's just utterly convinced that I need to get off this island and get back to reality. And so there's like some interplay that happens between them. Who's really in charge? Who's really the boss? Who's got the power? It's a really, really good movie. And I'll tell you what, I'm kind of saddened that the fact they released this film in January, because this really could have been a summer release. I think that a lot of people would have flocked to see it, and I think Rachel McAdams is fantastic in this movie, in this role as Linda Little. The development of her character, if you talk about how she's kind of awkward and not socially adept in the beginning of the film, and how she progresses to the end of the film, it's a fantastic film. I had a lot of fun. I laughed. I screamed. I jumped in horror. There's one scene. There's one scene in there. If you're a dude, man, this scene is like the scariest scene that could ever happen
Oh
to you.
yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Ugh, yeah, that was brutal.
So,
That was brutal.
but yeah, I had a lot of fun with this movie. I had a ball with it. I don't know about you, Tim. What did you think?
Look, I'm with you, man. I mean, I'm not the jump scare guy. You know, we've had this conversation. I don't, but I do like psychological horror. I just don't like slasher films, right? Or films that like, The Nun, these movies that sort of mix the iconography of like faith and like perverted and twisted in some way with some demonic stuff. I don't do those, right? But this movie, I thought it was interesting because my comment coming out of it to the press person was that, man, she's still a mean girl. She was a mean girl in Mean Girls, and she's still a mean girl 20 years later. But I thought for what it was, I thought it was an interesting character study of somebody who, as I said in my opening, is a little socially awkward, but really, really smart. And somebody that people sort of overlook. And then one day they don't understand that that person you've overlooked has an edge to them. And at some point you're in the crosshairs and really, really bad stuff happens, which we witness happening in this film. But to your point, this to me should not have been a quote unquote January release. You could have at least you could have given this April or this could have been August. It could have fell in one of those pockets, man, where I think it would have commanded a much larger audience that would have really appreciated it as sort of a change of pace to some other things that would be like the reason why I said late July or August is perfect because after you've gotten all these tentpole summer movies, something like this could have come along, and all of a sudden it could have caught an audience of people who wanted to go to the
Yeah,
movies anyway. But ain't
yeah.
really nobody going to the movies in January, man. Like, nah. So yeah, but you're right, man. Sam Raimi, and you talked about Drag Me. Was it Drag Me from Hell or Drag Me
Drag
to
me to
Hell?
hell. Drag me to
Man, that
hell.
was
Yep.
good.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not a big horror dude. That one worked for me. I was like, woo, woo. Same thing with weapons. To say I'm not a horror guy is different from being a slasher guy. I just don't like movies with a lot of blood, or as I said earlier, these sort of these sort of things where they're twisting and perverting the faith in that way, which I think is disrespectful, man. But yeah, I agree. So, what would you give it as a grade? Or I think you gave it, what was it, a B minus?
I gave it a B plus, I think.
You gave it a B. I think
Yeah.
you gave it a B minus, but I'm giving
It
it a
might have
B
been a B
minus.
minus.
Yeah, that's that. I think I agree with you, and I think the other joke was I saw Misery about, I mean, not Misery, Mercy about a week earlier, and everybody kept saying it's better than Mercy.
It's better than Mercy. It
It's
definitely
better than
is.
Mercy. So
It
it's a
would have
good
been a
movie,
really
man.
good warm up to the summer blockbuster field. If they dropped this like in April, I think it would have been really good. I think it would have done well.
All right.
But in January, in the middle of a snowstorm, most of the
You.
town is trying to dig out. It's not going to do well.
Now the
I
other
mean, it
film,
may win the week, but it's not going to, I don't know, break the bank.
no, I got you. And the other film is a story of a pair of estranged brothers who patch up their differences to search for a person responsible for their father's death in the explosive action adventure, The Wrecking Crew. And I reviewed that one, so let me lead off, man. This film to me, I was anxious going in because when you take two guys that people are very familiar with and you put them in roles that we sort of know them for that sort of work, sometimes they could just kind of dial it in and we get a film where, it's like, like you've heard me say, I've seen you better in other movies. I thought that Dave Bautista and Jason Momoa
Jason Momoa,
both brought their A games to this, and I think to me it felt like they were gonna one up each other. Like you're not gonna get the best of me as an action guy, and I thought the way they brought like Charles, have you seen this movie yet?
I have not seen it yet.
Oh my
No.
God! So pretty much what happens, man, is Jason Momoa is a police detective based in Oklahoma. His brother is a former Navy SEAL or who's working, I guess, or still maybe a Navy SEAL. He's doing some government work. And I think they're half brothers because his
Yeah,
Jason Momoa has a different mother, but they had the same father. And for whatever reason, they fell out like 2 decades earlier, haven't talked to one another. And the father is killed in a hit and run, which brings them back together. And when they come back together, they find out that there's a lot more to the father's accident that led to his death than what they were initially thought to have believed. And then you got to work through their animosity with each other and then them figuring their own stuff out anchored by these wonderful women in their lives who helps bring them back together to help kind of fight. I thought it was great. The action is great, of course. It's Jason Momoa, the physicality of both these guys. Uh, I think the end fights are cool, but the best fight, believe it or not, is when they got to fight each other. And and that looked like, I mean, I understand it's stage. That looked like that was a real fight. That was a really good fight. So I had a lot of fun with the Wrecking Crew, man. Now I hate the title. The title of me is stupid, which I don't understand that. The title has nothing to do with these two characters. Like I wouldn't call them the Wrecking Crew, but the title aside, I thought the movie was fun. I gave it a B minus or a B. I had a lot of fun with this, man. I really did.
Okay.
And I would highly suggest, Charles, over the weekend, if you're sitting in the house and there's yet another snowstorm, you can do a lot better than having some snacks and watching Jason Momoa and Dave Bautista beat themselves up before they beat up other people. That's a lot of fun, man. You got triads, you got all kind of stuff going on in this movie. Yeah.
Well, Dave Bautista is my favorite ex-wrestler actor out there. So I think anything he does is pretty a lot of fun. And so I can't wait to see this one.
All right, man. Well, we're running out of time, man. I think that's our time, man. But as I tell you guys every week, man, please see something good at the movies, man. Again, Charles, thanks for coming along for an unscripted ride, which I told you was going to work out. It always does. It always does.
We,
So
we
until
always
next,
find something to talk about.
pretty much, man. Until next time, man. Peace, man. You guys stay warm, stay safe, and we got more snow coming this weekend, man. Stay in the house, man. Find something good to watch on TV, man. Until next week, peace, man. We out. You guys take care.